Hello students and welcome to the class. I am your history teacher Manoj Arora. Today we will be studying the further part of the chapter, that is Bhakti Sufi traditions. In the last video I told you this is the chapter which will talk about the period from 8th to 18th century. We have studied a number of things about it. Before I start the chapter further, I hope you all will be fine at your homes, taking care of your family as well as yourself. Now moving on to the chapter. Today I will tell you about the Veer Shaiva tradition. I hope everybody remembers in the last video I taught you about the difference, a little bit difference between the Vaishnavas and the Shaivas in the north with the Alvas and Nainas in the south. Although both of them have got the same deities. Like the Vaishnavas and the Alvas, they both worship Lord Vishnu. And the Shaivas and the Nainas, they both worship Lord Shiva. But they have got the difference in the way they worship them. And today we will talk about a different mode of worship of Lord Shiva. One more mode of worship, that is Veer Shaiva tradition. It was started by Basavana. He was a religious teacher. Actually, he was a minister under the Kalachuri rulers in the 12th century. He started this. They were also known as Lingayats. That means they would hold up, they would wear the ling in a glass case over their left shoulder in a string. That's why they were called Lingayats. How they were different from other devotees, those who were worshipping Lord Shiva? Like generally in Hinduism, when the dead is to be brought to the last funeral rites, he is generally fired upon. He is generally took to fire. But in Veer Shaivas, they would bury the dead. Because they believe at the end day, Lord Shiva was going to come and who would take all these followers with him. That's why they questioned the authority of the Vedas. They did not understand the supremacy of the Brahmanas. They did not understand the concept which was given by Brahmanas about the theory of birth and rebirth. They also did not understand the supremacy of Vedas. They encouraged the practices. Whatever was being disapproved by Brahmanas, they would encourage that. Post-puberty marriages, the marriages, the remarriages of the widows, they would support these things, although it was not allowed in Brahmanism. Then they had composed the Vachanas in Kannada language. Now Vachanas, I would tell you a very interesting thing. In Vachana it is given that when you see a snake, real snake, you try to kill it. And you find a snake's picture in the temple and you try to feed that snake with milk. In this way, he had told many of the Vachanas which are written by men and women, those who followed this Veer Shaiva tradition. So this was about Veer Shaivas. Now talking about the religious ferment in the North India. As I just told, till the 14th century, nobody knew about the Alvas and Nainas in the north. Rather, Vaishnavism and Shaivism was at a promising note, at a promising stage. And nobody knew about Alvas and Nainas. Then the Brahmins had a huge following. Everybody would keep them as an intermediary between God and them. Any ritual was to be performed, any yajna was to be performed, or any religious ceremony was to be performed. That was not done without the Brahmanas. This was the time when Rajputs also had gained the power to a great extent. But after this, when Rajputs also got weakened, even with this, the Brahmanas also lost their importance. Religious leaders, except Brahmanas, also gained importance. Nath, Jogi, Siddhas were some of the people. Although they were very famous among the people, but they were not able to win the favor of the ruling elites. That means no ruler had ever accepted these local gurus, these local preachers. Now, these all people, Nath, Jogi, said again, the same as Alvars and Nayanas, as Veer Shaivas, they also challenge the authority of the Vedas. They also challenge the supremacy of the Brahmanas. In this way, there were many instances where we can see that Brahmanas were opposed because of their policies. And that in the starting of the chapter I had taught you that that's why the Brahmanas had to rework on their policies. They had to rework on their rules and regulations. Earlier, the low caste and the females were not allowed in Brahmanism. But when Brahmanas saw opposition from all sides, the Lingayats, the Nath, Jogi and Siddh, the Alvars and the Nayanas, well, from everywhere they saw oppositions and they saw people diverting towards other religion. These Brahmanas had to rework their policies. They had to rework their rules and regulations, and later on the low caste and the females were allowed to listen to the Vedas. This was something, and many of the places we could see that they had relaxed, they had given the relaxations in the rules. Now, if I talk about the coming of the Turks in the around 13th century, that led to the formation of Delhi Sultanate period also. If I talk about Delhi Sultanate, the starting was done by the Mamluks, then Khaljis, then Turks, then Sayyids, and then Lodhis. In this way, the entire Delhi Sultanate went on, and after that we saw the rule of the Mughals. But with coming of the Turks, it had undermined the power of the Rajputs. And in 711, with coming of Muhammad Qasim, Sindh was taken under the Arab rule, under the Arab domain, which led to the introduction of the Islam in the Indian subcontinent. After that, Afghans and Turks also came in. But if I talk about the official setup of Islam in India, that was done by Mughals in the 16th century. Now, Mughals came up, they had to follow the ulamas. Ulamas were the religious heads. Those who wanted that the entire kingdom, the subjects must be ruled according to the rules laid by their religious books, Quran and Hadith and other religious books. But it was very difficult on the parts of the Mughals. Why? Because the Mughals had to rule the Indians who were not Islamic, those who did not follow Islam. Hence, the Mughals, those who were Islams, had to rule the people, those who were not following Islam. So they had to bring a little bit flexibility in their policy, to which they also brought in. If I talk about the Islam or Muslims, if I talk about, the Muslims had given a category of zimmi, that is zimmedari, actually, zimmi, to the Jews and the Christians. The Jews and Christians would provide a nominal amount of tax, and they would come under the category of zimmi, and the Muslims would save those categories. This right of saving was provided even to Hindus in India. The Muslims had fairly a very fair policy, a very flexible policy for Hindus. They were granted lands, they were given different types of land revenues, grants, land grants were given so that they can have their own livelihood being done better. Akbar and Aurangzeb had tried to do the best in order to rule India. Even Akbar had removed jizya tax. Further, we will read in the next video. Now, I request you again to read NCERT very carefully. I request you to like the channel, subscribe the channel, hit the bell icon so that you can get all the future notifications. I request you to invest your time in studies. If you have got any problem, do let me know in the comment box, or the classes arranged by the school in the morning sessions. You can come there and ask your problems there also. Thank you very much. God bless you.